Great to have you along for the ride. Thanks a lot for stopping by. Glad to have this man back. It's Vance Ginn. He is the former chief economist for the Trump White House and just an all-around great guy. Go to vanceginn.com and go find out about him. Vance, how are you? Good to see you again.
Hey, Joe, I'm doing well. It's a pleasure to be with you.
So I just told you before we started, I did this video on social media. It's got about 1 million views on Instagram, 11.8 million views on TikTok, where I basically just take a snippet of the interview that Kamala Harris did, the first solo interview she's done since she was selected as the nominee, with some guy out of Philadelphia. And he says, give me 2 specific things you will do as president to bring down costs. She gives us about a 3-minute word salad about her mom and about how they loved their lawn. And there was another mother. They called their second mother, and they wanted to buy a house at one point. She never says what she'll do to bring down costs that you and I both know the American people are suffering under Bidenomics. She never goes there. So her answer is a word salad. Then Joe Biden today was at the Economy Club of D.C., and he literally says American households have a better balance sheet and have more money in their pockets and are doing better now than when I took office. And by all the metrics, that's just not true. So a simple question up front. We're not going to get an answer from Harris. She's just trying to win. But what specifically did Biden-Harris do when they took over for Trump that left a very good economy and an economy on the rise? What did they do to make it so bad?
Well, that's funny, all this stuff that they're saying, which of course is wrong.
Yeah.
And when you ask most Americans, 58% of Americans think we're in a recession right now. So they can't keep up with all the high costs that's going on. And so the things that have made it so bad from the Biden-Harris administration is the excessive government spending that they put in place. When you go back to the American Rescue, quote unquote, Rescue Plan Act that they put in place, or the Inflation Reduction Act, which did no such thing. These are the types of big government spending, along with their green energy agenda, that's created a situation where we don't have enough as much oil and gas. All prices are going up as well. These are the things that are holding us back from being able to prosper compared to what they believe or what they're arguing is the case. And so when you ask Americans across the country, they're not in a good situation from the Bidenomics and Harrisomics, or whatever you want to call it, Kamalanomics, I guess some are calling it now. This is a bad situation because of excessive government. And also the other thing too, Joe, is that it's been massive amounts of regulation. Whenever the Trump administration, whenever I was part of the Trump administration, we were cutting regulations. We were moving red tape for businesses to start and everything else. And the Biden administration comes in and puts all that back in place, plus more. And so this is why many people feel like this is not a good economy, no matter how much they want to sell it like it is.
It's such an important point about regulations. Vance Ginn, go and check him out, VanceGinn.com. What you just said about regulations is so important. As you know, because you were part of the administration, Trump said, sure, you can add regulation, but you got to lose 2 every time you add 1. So we literally saw a halving of the regulations as regulators wanted to add more. Fewer regulations, that means more freedom, more liberty, more ability to make money independent of the government. Lower taxation as well. He lowered taxes for everybody who pays income tax, not just for the rich, for everybody who pays income tax. Harris has been proud in saying I was the deciding vote on the Inflation Reduction Act, which was actually a green energy thing. Biden's even admitted it now. It was about the Green New Deal. She also was the deciding vote when it came to more IRS agents, going after people who get paid with tips. She literally wanted to go after people who weren't, she said, reporting enough tips. Now she wants no tax on tips. So she's trying to change her stance, but she can't. I love that you went with regulations, though. Break that down some more for me. When the government adds more regulations, why does that hurt me in my bank account?
Well, it hurts you in your bank account because it stifles economic innovation. It stifles supply. And if you're reducing supply and you have the same amount of demand, if not more, you're going to see higher prices. And so you don't have as much money in your pocket because inflationary pressures are going up all around us. And at the same time, we had the central bank, the Federal Reserve, printing so much money, putting so much money in the economy, while the Biden-Harris administration, really the Harris administration, I don't know who's really running the show over there these days, Joe, but they have been stifling all the supply. And so if you do that, at the same time you're putting in all this demand, you're going to get higher prices. And that's why we've seen inflation reach 9%. And some are saying, well, it's moderating now at 3%. And so now we're doing well. But remember, that 3% is on top of the 9% back in 2022, which was on top of the higher inflation from that period as well. And it's a direct result of their big government socialism coming out of Washington, D.C.
And the inflation rate is so important. I'm glad you went there. It's Vance Ginn. The inflation rate is in aggregate. It is not something that is, okay, well, it's lower this month than it was last month, therefore inflation as a whole is lower. No, it's not. Let's say it's 3% this month. It was 3.1 last month. Add those together. You don't subtract 1% or 0.1. So, yeah, when it's at 9%, it's not like we had a negative 9 and we made up for it somehow. This is in aggregate, right? I mean, the inflation rate is exponentially higher every month. Even if it's a lower number, it's added to the last number.
Yeah, it compounds. It compounds on each other. So you have 100. Let's say it's a 10% inflation rate, 100 to 110. Well, it's not off the next month or the next year isn't off of the 100 anymore. It's off the 110.
Yes.
So now if you go up 2%, now that's additional amount even above where we were before, and that is what they're saying is moderating now is the rate of inflation. But the higher prices are still with us, and they're even higher than they were before. So this is not a good situation. You know, Joe, if you go back to January of 2021 when the Biden administration came in, and you look at average weekly earnings, if you adjust that for inflation since then, they're down 4%. Down 4%. That means that you can buy 4% less of what you could buy going back to January of 2021. And that's one reason why so many people feel strapped with cash. And then it's just nonsense that Biden and Harris try to come out and say this is a good economy and everything else. In fact, the Federal Reserve, the central bank, cut interest rates yesterday by 50 basis points because they say inflation's moderating, but they're also concerned about the labor market weaknesses that are going on, which is one reason why they've cut the interest rate. And so that to me indicates that, look, this is not a good economy, no matter how much they want to sell it like it is, because it's election season. And maybe that's why the Federal Reserve also cut their interest rate because the election's coming up, right? But these are major issues that are facing Americans and their daily budget. And unfortunately, the Biden-Harris administration are not reflecting what's happening at people's kitchens all across the country.
Vance Ginn,
their kitchen
PhD.
table.
No, exactly right. Former chief economist for the White House, for the Trump White House. Let's talk about what we saw yesterday. Jerome Powell comes out and he says unemployment is up because of the influx of illegal migrants across the border, or because of the southern border. And then KJP comes out, the press secretary, and she says, as Jerome Powell just said, the employment is solid, it's firm, it's looking good, and the unemployment rate remains low. No, it went up because of illegal crossings. And at the same time, Kamala Harris is at the Congressional Hispanic Caucus talking about how we have to find a path to citizenship to everybody who just came across the border illegally. So what am I to believe? Jerome Powell says that the unemployment rate is up because of the crossings on the border. Kamala Harris wants them to stay here, even though they came here illegally. And KJP wants us to believe that it's all rainbows and sunshine. What do we believe?
Well, look, I believe this is a slowing economy.
What's the truth?
And but the truth is that this is a slowing economy. And when you look at how fast the unemployment rates went up from about 3.5% a year ago to almost 4.5%, it's at 4.3% now, that's a sizable increase. Whether it's the people are coming across the border illegally or just not enough jobs that are going on here in America, that's contributing to a slowing economy. And it's something that I've been talking about for a long time, is that many people after COVID decided not to go back into the labor force. And when you have that situation, that keeps the unemployment rate artificially low, because now you have fewer people in the labor force. That also means there's fewer people that are unemployed. And instead, they're staying home, staying on unemployment benefits, staying on other sort of government handouts for so many years. And maybe once a lot of those start to run out, they'll go back in the labor force. But Joe, I think this has really changed up a lot of the psyche of workers across the country, because they got into this period of saying, you know what, I'd rather stay home and not work and live off of government. And this changes the whole psyche about work, which is, it brings about dignity and respect. And I really believe that God created us to work, and fulfill this idea of being fruitful and multiply. We should be thinking about that versus having all these handouts and everything else, and thinking about why we should, legalize all the people that have come over from government failures, by the way, which is difficult to solve it from more government, because if you put in more government at a time when you already have government failures, you're going to exacerbate the problems that you already had.
It's Vance Ginn, PhD, former chief economist for the Trump White House. Really appreciate the time and the access. When we talk about Kamala Harris's plan, by the way, she has no plan to bring down costs. She just didn't answer the question. But she mentions a $50,000 tax break for new business owners, which I'm not really sure. You can't open a new business right now. Nobody's lending any money. And also $25,000. Hey, here's 25 grand if you want to buy a house for a down payment. Now, you and I are smart enough to know that the sellers of the houses will now raise the price by 25 grand. It's not going to help anybody as far as the down payment goes. But I don't know where that money comes from. There are stipulations on that. You've got to be a first generation American or something. The whole thing doesn't make any sense. How bad would that be if we started giving tax breaks if you fill into some certain DEI thing, or you started giving $25,000 in down payment money to people willy-nilly? I mean, it doesn't sound like it's going to help to me. Sounds like it's going to hurt badly.
Yeah, it will. I mean, we're already in a situation where we have a fiscal crisis where government spending is exceeding tax revenue by $2 trillion plus every year. And you try to throw more money into the economy, that's going to lead to not only more inflation in the housing market, but inflation across the economy. And so this will make it to where that $50,000 that they're trying to use for small businesses will be dissipated or go away very quickly because you just raise prices all across the economy by about that amount. The same thing goes for housing prices. Inflation, housing prices will go up about $25,000, meaning those people are going to be hit harder. And what about the people who don't get the $25,000? You know, Joe, we've got to get out of this business of picking winners and losers. I've been talking to Republicans just like I am about to Democrats about we got to get out of this game about picking winners and losers. Instead, we should have the broadest tax base possible with the lowest rates, and we've got to focus on government spending. If we don't focus on reducing government spending, we're going to have more problems in the future because that's really what's driving the national debt higher and higher. Interest rates are continuing to go up, and they will go up, especially given the amount of debt that's out there. And then inflation will continue to pick up as well because the Federal Reserve will want to monetize a lot of that debt. And so I'm really concerned for Americans if we go down this path. We've really got to try to find a way to get control of government spending.
It's VanceGinn.com. Go to his website, VanceGinn.com. It's Vance Ginn, PhD, former chief economist at the Trump White House. I'm glad that you said all that because you're flooding more money that they don't have already into a market just devalues the money that we already have. It's going to push prices up on homes. And again, it's not a $50,000 stipend go and open a business. It's a tax break. Well, you can only have a tax break if you have enough income from your business to have a $50,000 tax break, and businesses are set up to fail under Bidenomics. I wanted to talk about the jobless rate again and about the job pool. I'm a simple guy. So when we talk about the actual pool of workers that are in the workforce that are looking for work and how that identifies the actual unemployment rate, I always use the number 100. Let's say there's 100 people that are in the pool and 25 people are without a job. So that means it's a 25% unemployment rate. If we lower the actual number of people available in that pool to 75 and 20 people have jobs, fewer people have jobs, but the unemployment rate is better because more people are employed, but it's a smaller pool. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah, it does. Even more simple here is say there's 4 people, right?
Yeah.
Instead of using the bigger numbers, 4, you have 3 of them who are employed. That's 75% employment rate or 25% unemployment rate.
Yes.
If one drops out, that goes to 2/3. That's 67%. So the unemployment rate went down, but now we have fewer people that are even looking for jobs.
Exactly right.
And so this is a big situation that we found over the last few years, especially after COVID, but then under Bidenomics, is that more people are finding it profitable to stay out of the labor market, and unfortunately, that's what's keeping the unemployment rate a lot lower. Had the labor force participation rate been the same as it was before COVID and before, back in February of 2019, the unemployment rate would be closer to 6.5%. Which is not a good situation. That would be a recession. And Joe, one of the other things that we should mention here is that they keep revising these jobs created numbers down substantially month after month.
Yeah, quietly.
Yes, the last 2 months it was revised down 89,000, and that was just after they had revised it down 818,000 over the last year. And you're exactly right. The media, except for you and maybe a couple of others, are actually reporting on that. And this is a huge thing because back whenever I was in the Trump administration, they were revising the numbers up, not down, and nobody talked about it then, but they were smaller adjustments. Now these are massive adjustments, 50,000 here, 100,000 here, 800,000 here, and these are reducing the benefits of those gains that when they initially reported it. So they'll report it, they'll say, oh, look at all these jobs we're creating. They come out, those never existed. They were erased later on, and then they don't report on that later. This is a major problem.
It's Vance Ginn, PhD, former chief economist for the Trump White House. Let me ask you about, as we're looking at the economy going forward, we know that we're still, in many ways, on the COVID spending plan. At what point do we roll back to the pre-COVID numbers? Why has Biden kept it so high? And of course, he's not spending it on COVID. He's not spending it on helping people healthy, health-wise. They're spending it on green energy and garbage that most of us don't even know is in there. So what is it going to take to get us to roll it back to the pre-COVID numbers? Because people will say Trump spent more money than Biden or something like that. And my answer, of course, is, well, he had to because of COVID. That came out of the blue. You had to step up the spending from the federal government to help out people who are in need. But we're beyond that now. At what point can we roll that back, Vance?
Yeah, we've got to. I mean, you're right on. This continues to be a major issue.
But nobody talks about it. We're still in that spending plan.
Yeah, we still are. It's what I call budget inertia, where they just take the last budget and keep building off of that. At some point, we need to do some zero-based budgeting, some priority-based budgeting, and say, you know what? Which areas of the budget are actually constitutional? There's a lot of areas that the federal government should not be involved in, like the Department of Education, Department of Energy. We should be leaving this to the states or to the people. The federal government should be very limited overall. And so I think this is a big issue that needs to come up, is to figure out how much should we cut in the budget entirely, and then think about a good spending limit that keeps the budget from growing above it, kind of like a governor in your car. You can't go above that because it's too risky. It could cause problems to the engine and everything else. The same thing goes whenever you overspend from government, is that it is not safe. It's not safe for the economy or anything else. And so I think we need something like population growth plus inflation as a good limiter to it. That should be a maximum, not a target. But you're right. At the end of the day, we should go back to the 2019 levels and then think about maybe growing from there, because otherwise we're spending way too much. The level of spending is way too high.
Last question for Vance Ginn, maybe about 45 seconds, Vance, if you don't mind. I'm not going to time you, but the question is this. Is it smart what the Republicans are doing in the House right now when it comes to the continuing resolution? We should have a budget at some point, but is it smart that they're finally digging their heels in? Does it make sense?
It makes some sense. I would like to see more cuts, to be honest with you, than what they're doing right now. Just like our conversation we're having here is that we're already spending way too much. So if they want to put the SAVE Act on or other things, dealing with some of the major the crisis that's happening along the border,
right.
I get that. But I really would push them and urge them to do more on cutting spending. If we can cut spending, at least put it on the table from the House Republicans. The Senate are probably going to pass it anyway. So why not make as many cuts as possible to put us on a fiscal path that's the right direction for America?
That would be really smart. The Democrats do that wisely. The Republicans don't seem to do it. Use the leverage you have. You've got the purse strings. Give them the budget that has massive cuts. Let them say no, and then tell the American people, we tried, but they wouldn't do it. This is why the debt and the deficit are where they are. Vance, always incredible knowledge. Thanks for jumping in the chair today. Let's do this again before the election, because the economy is going to be, I think, the chief thing people are pulling the lever for, okay?
That sounds great. Thank you so much.
Brother, I appreciate you. We're back after this. Stay right here.